The rain had been falling since early afternoon, turning the narrow lanes of old Macau into silver ribbons under the dim glow of paper lanterns. By the time you leave the bustle of the Senado Square behind, your shoes are wet through, each step clicking softly against the worn stone. The sound of the city at night is muted here, the shouting of hawkers replaced by the slow drip of rain from tiled roofs. The distant roll of thunder somewhere over the bay. You follow a narrow alley that curves like a question mark, lined with the shuttered fronts of shops whose owners have long since gone home. The scent of the harbor lingers in the air, salt, fish, and the faint metallic temps of the wet sea breeze. But there is something else mixed in now, a subtle perfume of sandalwood and candle wax that drifts from somewhere ahead. At the end of the alley stands a building that looks no different from the rest. 2 stories of weathered plaster with a narrow wooden balcony that sags just slightly under the weight of the rain. A single red lantern hangs from an iron bracket beside the door, swaying gently in the breeze. There is no sign, no name, only the faint shadow of a man in a long dark coat standing just inside the doorway. He watches you approach without moving. His eyes flick once to your face, then down to your hands, as if searching for some invisible signal. After a moment, he steps aside, allowing you to pass into the warmth within. The first breath you take inside is heavy with sandalwood and tobacco smoke. The room is lit entirely by oil lamps set into ornate brass fixtures, their light spilling across walls lined with dark wood panels carved with peonies and cranes. The floor is covered in thick rugs that swallow the sound of footsteps. In the center of the room stands a long counter, where a man in a silk vest writes something slowly into a ledger with an ink brush. Behind him, a carved screen blocks the view of the rooms beyond. You hand over a small slip of paper, a name, written in neat brushstrokes by someone who trusts you enough to bring you here. The man glances at it briefly, then nods and gestures toward the screen. You step through into another world. The lantern house is nothing like the crude gambling dens whispered about by dockside sailors. Here, the air hums with quiet intensity, rather than chaos. Low tables draped in deep red cloth are arranged in small clusters, each lit by its own lamp whose warm glow turns every surface into gold. At one table, men in long gowns and round spectacles lean forward in concentration over stacks of bone-white dominoes. At another, 2 Portuguese traders play cards with a Chinese silk merchant, their conversation a slow blend of Cantonese, Portuguese, and gestures that belong to no single language. The sound here is soft but layered. The rattle of dice cups, the shuffle of cards, the murmured wagers in half a dozen tongues. The staff moves like shadows between the tables, refilling porcelain, teacups, delivering plates of dried fruit and salted almonds. No one raises their voice, and yet every table thrums with a tension that you can feel in your bones. You are led toward the back of the room, where the games grow more elaborate. Here, the tables are oval, their green felt surfaces scattered with polished stones, silver coins, and stacks of banknotes held down by small jade paperweights. A group of older men sit around one table playing fantan, each with their own small silver cup. The dealer's hands move with mesmerizing precision, arranging and counting the brass buttons with the tip of a slender bamboo stick. Across from them, a game of pai gow unfolds in deliberate silence, the heavy bone tiles clicking softly as they are revealed. The players' faces reveal nothing, the stillness of seasoned gamblers who have learned long ago that the smallest twitch of an eyebrow can cost a fortune. Your host, a man in a tailored black chengshan, with a gold dragon embroidered at the cuff, pauses beside a particular table. Seated here are three figures who seem to command the room's subtle gravity. The first is a tall woman in her 40s, her hair swept into a neat chignon, secured with a single silver pin. Her gown is deep green silk embroidered with chrysanthemums, and a long string of pearls drapes from her neck to her waist. She holds her cards lightly, as though they weigh nothing, her long fingers tapping once against the table before she places a bet with the quiet certainty of someone who has won more than she has lost. Beside her sits a young man in a dark western suit, his hair slicked neatly back, his tie loosened. The faintest shadow of a smile curves his lips as he leans forward to study the game, his fingertips resting lightly on a stack of folded banknotes. You notice the silver watch chain glinting against his vest, and wonder if it marks him as a clerk in some trading house or a banker's son playing with money he can afford to lose. The third player is older, his thin frame wrapped in a faded brown robe. His long white beard rests against his chest as he studies the table, eyes half-lidded but sharp. Every so often, he lifts a small porcelain cup to his lips and takes a slow sip of tea before setting it down exactly in the same place. Your host leans toward you and murmurs something about the stakes at this table being higher than most. The woman glances up, her gaze sweeping over you with quick appraisal before returning to her cards. The older man says nothing at all, but you can feel the weight of his attention like the slow pull of the tide. Beyond this table, a narrow corridor leads deeper into the lantern house. The walls here are lined with paintings of ships in full sail, their masts leaning into the wind, their hulls heavy with trade. You pass several small private rooms where pairs of players sit across from each other, their games accompanied by the soft plink of coins into wooden bowls. Some rooms are curtained entirely, their occupants hidden from view except for the occasional silhouette that moves in the lamplight. The corridor ends in a small lounge where the pace changes entirely. Here, the gamblers have stepped away from the tables to drink tea or rice wine, their conversations mingling with the low strains of a two-stringed erhu being played by a woman seated in the corner. The music curls through the air like smoke, slow and plaintive, weaving itself into the hum of voices. It is here that you begin to meet the characters who give this house its quiet pulse. A Portuguese ship captain named Duarte sits alone at a small table, a half-empty glass of amber liquor before him. His broad shoulders are hunched, his eyes fixed on the patterns in the wood grain as though they contained some private map. He has been coming here for years, you are told, always after a voyage, always playing the same game of dice in the same seat by the back wall. Tonight, however, he has not yet touched the dice cup. Something about the way his fingers drum lightly against the table suggests a man waiting for news rather than chasing luck. In another corner, a woman in a pale blue cheongsam sits with her back perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap. Her hair is cut short in the modern style, her lips painted a deep crimson that catches the lamplight when she turns her head. She watches the room with the calm attentiveness of someone who understands exactly how much is at stake in every conversation. Some say she owns a share of the lantern house, others that she simply controls the flow of information within it. Either way, her presence commands a certain deference from the staff, who refill her tea without being asked and never linger at her table. Time here moves differently. Outside, the rain still falls on the stone streets of Macau, but inside the lantern house, the hours are measured only by the rise and fall of fortunes. A man who entered with a small pile of silver coins now sits slumped at the bar, staring at the empty space before him. Another, who arrived with little more than a folded note, now walks away from the tables with a pocket heavy enough to change the course of his month. Your host reappears, offering you a place at a small table near the lounge. The game is simple. To dice in a lacquered cup, wagers placed on the outcome. The other players smile politely as you take your seat. The cup rattles, the dice tumble, and just like that, you are no longer merely an observer. The rhythm of the house has taken. You in the lantern house does not roar with victory or groan with defeat. Its victories are marked by the subtle lift of an eyebrow, the quiet gathering of coins into a sleeve. Its defeats are measured in sips of tea taken just a little too slowly. But in the quiet between throws, between the turning of cards, there is a sense of something shared, a recognition that every person here, from the seasoned matriarch to the young clerk, has come seeking the same thing. Not merely luck, but the brief suspension of everything that exists beyond these carved wooden walls. And as you sit there, the sound of the dice still ringing softly in your ears, you realize that the lantern house is less a place of gambling than a place where time itself is wagered, where each roll, each card, each bet is a small defiance of the world waiting outside in the rain. The dice cup moves to the next player, a man with the rough hands of a fisherman and the neat, pressed shirt of someone who knows how to pass unnoticed in more refined company. He tosses the dice with a practiced flick, the cubes tumbling across. The felt before settling on a perfect 7. The other players murmur their approval, and small stacks of silver change hands. You sip your tea, the steam curling toward your face, carrying with it the faint scent of dried chrysanthemum. The warmth spreads through you, tempering the cool dampness that still clings from the rainy streets outside. Around you, the lounge hums with that same quiet intensity, the sound of fortunes shifting in increments, each decision made with the patience of a fisherman waiting for the tide. Your host leans down, his voice low enough to blend into the music drifting from the erhu in the corner. He tells you there is another floor above this one, reserved for a select few. The stakes there are different, he says, not only in coin, but in consequence. You follow his gaze to a narrow staircase, hidden in the shadows near the far wall. The steps creak softly under your weight as you ascend. At the top, a heavy silk curtain parts to reveal a room unlike anything you've yet seen in the lantern house. The air is warmer here, thick with sandalwood and the faint resinous aroma of burning argarwood chips. The light comes from tall standing lamps, their shades painted with scenes of mountains and rivers, casting the room in an amber glow. There are only 4 tables in this room, each large enough to seat 6, but currently occupied by fewer. The spacing between them is deliberate, allowing for privacy even without walls. The people here are dressed with understated elegance, nothing gaudy, but every detail precise. A man in a dove-grey changshan with black silk cuffs studies his tiles with the intensity of a scholar. Across from him, a foreign gentleman in a crisp white linen suit leans back in his chair, swirling a glass of rice wine as though the game is merely a distraction from some larger matter in his mind. Are guided toward a table near the window, where the faint patter of rain against the shutters blends with the muted clatter of tiles. The man seated there is introduced only as Mr. Lau, his name spoken with the quiet respect one reserves for someone whose reach is longer than it appears. His face is smooth and unlined despite his age, and his hands resting lightly on the table are adorned with a single jade ring. Beside him sits a woman in her 30s wearing a sleeveless kippao patterned with cranes in flight. She has the kind of posture that makes stillness seem like power, her eyes following the game with the detachment of someone who can afford patience. The other seat is empty, and Mr. Lau gestures toward it with a small, almost imperceptible movement. The game begins. Pai Gao again, but the rhythm is different here. Each player takes their time, arranging and rearranging tiles as though adjusting the pieces of a much larger puzzle. Bets are placed without a word, silver notes folded neatly. Beneath jade weights, gold coins slid forward in silence. The dealer, a lean man in a plain black robe, moves with the same care as a calligrapher, placing each brushstroke. Between rounds, conversation flows, but never in full sentences. A remark about the price of sandalwood shipments from Hainan, a question about whether a certain steamer has left Hong Kong yet. An observation about the governor's recent visit to the Senado Palace. None of it seems connected, yet you sense a web of meaning in the way glances are exchanged. From your seat, you can see across the room to a table where the woman in the pale blue cheongsam from downstairs now sits. She is speaking quietly to a man whose face you cannot see clearly, his back to you. Their heads incline toward each other just enough to suggest that whatever they are discussing is not meant for other ears. Mr. Lau wins the next hand with a quiet satisfaction that shows only in the way his fingers tap twice on the jade ring. He takes his winnings without counting them, sliding the notes into a small black envelope and placing it in his sleeve. Then, without looking at you, he says that most people think the house exists only for the games. But the games, he explains, are simply the surface, the visible current. Beneath it runs something deeper, and those who understand it know that the real stakes are never on the table. The woman beside him smiles faintly, though her eyes remain on her tiles. She adds that the lantern house is like the harbor. Ships come and go, each carrying something, some visible, some hidden. The house is simply the place where those currents meet. The dealer clears the table for the next round. As the tiles are shuffled, you catch sight of the foreign gentleman in the white suit from earlier. He rises, excusing himself from his table, and disappears through a door at the far side of the room. A moment later, the woman in the pale blue cheongsam follows, her movements unhurried but deliberate. Mr. Lau notices your glance but says nothing. Instead, he sets his bet for the next round, a stack of coins that catches the lamplight in a way that makes them look almost like they are glowing. The game continues, each round a careful dance of calculation and restraint. In this room, there are no outbursts, no shows of frustration. Losses are accepted with the same grace as wins, though you sense that every result is remembered, recorded somewhere behind expressionless faces. After an hour, Mr. Lau excuses himself, standing, with the unhurried grace of someone who expects to be watched. The woman in the crane-patterned kippao gathers her winnings and follows him, leaving you alone at the table with the quiet dealer, who begins to arrange the tiles for another game. A soft chime sounds from somewhere beyond the far door, and a member of the staff, dressed in plain brown, almost invisible, approaches to whisper something to the dealer. Without a word, the dealer gathers the tiles, covers the table with a cloth, and gestures for you to follow. You are led down a different staircase than the one you came up, emerging into a narrow corridor lined with lacquered cabinets. The air here is cooler, touched with the faint smell of ink and paper. The corridor opens into a side lounge lit by a single hanging lantern, where a handful of people sit in low chairs, speaking in tones barely above a whisper dot in the center of the room. stands the foreign gentleman in the white suit, now with a cigarette between his fingers. Beside him, the woman in the pale blue cheongsam pours tea into 2 small cups. When she looks up, her gaze meets yours for just a moment, long enough to register that she knows you have seen her twice now, and that neither time was an accident. Your host appears again, as if summoned by that glance. He tells you it is time to return to the main floor if you wish to leave with the same anonymity you arrived with. There is no pressure in his tone, but the weight of the suggestion is clear. Back in the lounge, the erhu still plays its winding melody, and the games continue as though nothing has shifted. Yet you feel the change, a subtle awareness that the Lantern House is not only a place of chance and silver coins, but a place where the flow of information, alliances, and quiet negotiations runs beneath every roll of the dice. Outside, the rain has eased to a fine mist. The streets glisten under the lantern light, their stones slick and dark. Somewhere far behind you, within those carved wooden walls, the games go on. The dice rattle, the tiles click, and the current beneath it all carries on its endless course, unseen by most who walk the streets of Macau. It has been nearly a month since the rain-soaked night you first stepped into the Lantern House. Macau's weather has shifted. The air is drier now, the evenings scented with the sea and the faint, dusty fragrance of bougainvillea blooming along. The city walls, the harbour, usually restless with the comings and goings of small coastal junks and steamers, lies unusually still under a pale moon. You had not planned to return. The Lantern House lingers in memory the way a scent does, half forgotten until a chance moment calls it back. But tonight, as you walk the tiled streets toward the market square, you find your feet carrying you toward the narrow alley where the single red lantern sways. There is no invitation this time, no slip of paper with your name. And yet, the man in the dark coat at the doorway glances at you once and steps aside, as though your presence has been anticipated. Inside, the warmth is familiar, as is the scent of sandalwood and tobacco that greets you like an old acquaintance. The oil lamps still cast their golden light across carved wood panels, but the atmosphere feels subtly different, quieter, more watchful. The low murmur of conversation in Cantonese, Portuguese, and English seems to carry a new undercurrent, as though every word is chosen more carefully than before. In the main lounge, the games are underway. Men lean over mahjong tables, their hands moving with the muscle memory of decades, while at the dice tables, the soft rattle of the cup punctuates the hum of voices. The woman in the pale blue cheongsam is absent tonight, but you recognize others from your last visit. The fisherman in his pressed shirt is here, his luck apparently running well, judging by the modest but steady pile of coins at his side. Your host appears with the same unhurried steps, greeting you with a small nod. He suggests you take a seat. Near the back, where the shadows from a tall standing lamp leave the table half in light, half in darkness. The tea arrives without you asking, chrysanthemum again, its yellow petals drifting lazily in the cup. It is during your second round of dice that you notice Mr. Lau. He is standing near the staircase that leads to the upper floor, speaking quietly with a man in a Western naval uniform. Their exchange is brief, no more than a few words, but when they part, the uniformed man heads for the door without looking back. Mr. Lau's gaze sweeps the room once before settling, very deliberately, on you. He tilts his head slightly, a silent question. You leave your coins on the table and follow. The upper floor is, as you remember, the amber lamplight. the scent of agarwood, the deliberate spacing of the 4 tables. But tonight, only 2 of them are in use. The others sit empty, their green felt surfaces gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Mr. Lau leads you to one of the unoccupied tables and sits opposite. Folding his hands before him, he asks, without preamble, whether you have ever considered that the lantern house might remember its guests as carefully as its guests remember the lantern house. Before you can answer, a young attendant appears, placing a single envelope on the table between you. The paper is thick, its edges crisp, sealed with a small smear of red wax dot. Mr. Lau does not open it. Instead, he pushes it toward you with the tip of one finger. The envelope contains, he says, an opportunity. The kind that arrives rarely and leaves quickly. You are under no obligation, but if you decline, the house will forget you again, politely, entirely, and forever. You do not reach for the envelope immediately. Instead, you glance toward the other occupied table, where 3 men are playing pi gao in near silence. One of them, a broad-shouldered man, with the deep tan of someone used to the open sea, meets your eyes for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he returns to his tiles. When you finally pick up the envelope, it feels heavier than its size suggests. Inside is a single folded sheet bearing an address in typer, written in a steady hand. No name, no instructions. Only the address and a time 2 nights from now, just after sunset. Mr. Lau says nothing more. He gathers his hands into his sleeves, stands, and leaves the table without looking back. You remain upstairs a while longer, watching the games. The foreign gentleman in the white linen suit is here tonight, though his jacket is draped over the back of his chair, his sleeves rolled neatly to the elbow. He plays slowly, his movements measured, as though he is listening to something far away. At one point, he turns slightly, and you catch sight of a faint scar along his jawline, half hidden by the LAMP LIGHT. That the hour grows late. You descend to the main floor, pausing in the lounge where the erhu still sings its winding, melancholy melody. The fisherman is gone, his seat now occupied by a young clerk whose tie is too tight and whose eyes dart nervously toward the door with every throw of the dice outside. The night is clear. The red lantern above the doorway sways gently in the sea breeze, casting its light in slow arcs across the alley. You slip the envelope into your coat pocket and make your way toward the harbor, where the masts of moored junks stand like dark teeth against the moonlit sky. 2 nights later, you find yourself walking the narrow streets of Taipei. The air smells of salt and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once before falling silent. The address leads you to a house, set back from the road, its gate flanked by stone lions whose faces have been worn smooth by time. A single lamp burns in an upstairs window. The door opens before you knock. A man in plain clothes gestures for you to enter, guiding you through a narrow hall into a room lit by a single oil lamp. The furnishings are sparse: a low table, 4 chairs, a sideboard with a porcelain teapot and cups. On the table lies a lacquered box, its surface inlaid with mother-of-pearl cranes. Seated beside it is the woman in the pale blue changsum. Her hair is pinned back tonight, her expression unreadable. She greets you as though she has been expecting you for hours, her voice low and even. She explains that the Lantern House is more than a place of games. It is a harbor for certain kinds of exchanges, the kind that require trust, discretion, and the ability to understand the unspoken. Some of those exchanges, she says, take place far from its walls, yet remain part of its current. She opens the lacquered box. Inside, beneath a folded cloth, are stacks of paper currency from several countries, along with a small envelope no larger than your palm. The contents, she tells you, must be delivered to a man who will be waiting on the Rua da Praia just before the tide turns. You will know him by the red thread tied around his left wrist. No questions, no delays. Her eyes hold yours for a moment longer than necessary, as if weighing something. Then she closes the box and slides it across the table. The task itself is simple. The meaning behind it is not. You leave the house in Taipa, with the box under your arm, the moon high overhead. The streets are empty, the sea whispering against the shore. When you reach the Rua da Praia, a figure steps from the shadow of a warehouse, a man in a fisherman's cap, his left wrist bound with red thread. The exchange takes no more than a moment. The box leaves your hands. The man nods once, and he is gone, melting into the darkness as though he had never been there. Back in the lantern house the following evening, no one mentions the errand. The games go on as before. The clatter of tiles, the soft rattle of dice, the low hum of conversation. And yet, as you take your seat in the lounge, the woman in the pale blue cheongsam passes behind you, resting her hand lightly on your shoulder for the briefest instant. It is enough to tell you that the house remembers. It begins with something so small you almost miss it. A folded note slipped beneath your cup just as you lift it to drink. The paper is thin, nearly weightless, but there's a faint scent of sandalwood clinging to it, as if it's been kept in a drawer with incense. You unfold it under the cover of your palm. 3 things are written in neat, unhurried brushstrokes. A place you don't recognize, a time, midnight, and nothing else. No name, no instructions, no signature. The hours until midnight drag. You sit at your usual table in the main lounge, but the games tonight feel different, or perhaps it's you who is different. You see things now you hadn't before. The fisherman with the pressed shirt is here again, rolling his dice with that same careful flick, never too hard, never too soft. The northernmost mahjong dealer pauses every 30 minutes to adjust his sleeve and exchange the smallest of nods with the dice keeper under the wall clock. At the baccarat table, 2 women play silently for nearly an hour, their hands moving. Like clockwork, their bets always falling into the same patterns. A rhythm you suspect has nothing to do with the cards. Mr. Lau is nowhere to be seen, but the woman in the crane-patterned kipao occupies a table near the far wall. She smiles when she loses, which is often, but never changes her posture. Across the room, the foreign gentleman in the white linen suit sits with his jacket back on, his Panama hat resting neatly beside him. He doesn't play. He only watches, his gaze moving from one table to the next, lingering a second too long on the door that leads to the upper floor. When the appointed hour nears, you leave through the side exit. The night air is cool, heavy, with the smell of the harbor, brine and coal smoke, distant fish stalls closing for the night. The streets are quiet. Only your footsteps echo between the shuttered shops. The address leads you to a building that looks abandoned. Its windows are dark, shutters closed tight. The doorway is recessed into shadow, marked only by a single lantern swaying gently in the night breeze. The glass is cloudy with age, and the light inside is a tired amber. You step through into a narrow hallway that smells faintly of damp stone. A wooden staircase leads down, each step worn smooth by years of passage. The further you descend, the cooler the air becomes. At the bottom, a long corridor stretches ahead, lit by small floor lamps, whose glow barely reaches the walls. You are not alone. The fisherman with the pressed shirt is already here, his arms folded loosely, eyes steady. The man from the upper floor stands with his hands in his pockets, a shadow in the half-light. A young clerk in a rumpled suit shifts his weight from foot to foot, his tie pulled so tight it seems to choke him. No one speaks. The corridor opens into a large, low-ceilinged chamber. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the sharp, faintly sweet scent of Chinese wine. Here, the tables are bare wood, no polished surfaces, no embroidered cloths. The lamps are placed low on the tabletops, casting shadows upward so that every face looks carved, every eye set deep. There are no dealers here. The players handle the stakes themselves, coins stacked neatly, folded notes tucked into sleeves, and every so often something else entirely. A carved bone token, a small sealed envelope, a key no larger than your thumbnail. You are guided to a table where 3 others are already seated. Tonight's game is Fantan, but here it feels almost ceremonial. No shouts, no sharp calls, no sudden movements. Every bet is placed with care. Every round unfolds like a slow turn of the tide. Your own pile of coins grows and shrinks with each game, but your attention keeps slipping to what happens just after each round. Hands meeting briefly under the edge of the table, objects exchanged and hidden away without a word. At another table, a man in a black coat pushes his chair back with a sudden scrape. His face is pale, his eyes set straight ahead. He leaves without collecting his winnings. No one stops him, and within seconds the game resumes as though he were never there. When your own game ends, the broad-shouldered man leans toward you for the first time. His voice is deep, unhurried. His words wade before they are spoken. The games upstairs, he says, are the surface, pretty currents. But this, he gestures, faintly toward the chamber around you. This is the undertow. It's what holds the whole house in place. He says nothing more, but his meaning lingers in the quiet between you. On the way out, you notice something you hadn't before. The corridor you entered from branches into 2 paths. You were led back toward the stairs, but down the other path, far in the distance, a faint red lantern flickers. For a moment, you think you see a shadow pass in front of it. Then you are turning away, the vision gone. When you step back into the main lounge, dawn is not far. The first light of day seeps through the shutters, softening the glow of the oil lamps. The erhu player is still there, his melody curling like smoke above the clatter of dice. The woman in the pale blue cheongsam arrives, just as you finish your tea. She doesn't meet your eye, she doesn't need to. As she passes, she sets something. On your table, a single white dragon tile, cool and smooth beneath your fingers. It stays there after she is gone. A small weight between your cup and the empty chair across from you, when you finally leave. The streets are slick with mist, the cobblestones glistening under the first touch of sunlight. The harbor is stirring, fishermen hauling nets, steam curling from the funnels of moored vessels, gulls crying overhead. In your pocket, the white dragon rests against your palm, its smooth surface colder than the morning air. It feels like a token, but you know better. It is an invitation, or a warning, or both. For 2 days, the white dragon tile remains in your pocket, not because you've forgotten it, you couldn't, but because you can't decide if it belongs somewhere safer, or if keeping it close is the only safety there is. You find yourself touching it without realizing, when waiting for your tea to cool, when passing strangers in the street, when pausing at a shop window. Its edges are clean, the carved surface smooth and cold. Sometimes it feels lighter than it should, sometimes heavier. By the third evening, you are back at the lantern house. The moment you step inside, you sense something shifted. The lamps seem to burn lower, the air more crowded, though the room isn't full. The players' murmurs roll in measured waves, and from your seat you see patterns in their movement you never noticed before. The slow signal of a head tilt, a bet adjusted mid-hand, a smile held one beat too long. The games are the same. You are not. You watch the fisherman with the pressed shirt win 3 rounds in a row, lose the 4th, then walk away without collecting his last pot. You see the baccarat table stall in silence while a dealer rearranges a deck as if it were nothing. The northernmost mahjong dealer pauses at the same moment the dice keeper checks the wall clock, and you realize this is not coincidence but choreography. An hour passes before you see her. The woman in the pale blue cheongsam. She sits near, the back posture straight but unforced, the light catching in her pinned hair. She isn't playing. She's watching the room like someone waiting for the exact moment to step in. When she does look at you, it's only for a second, but it's enough. She leaves without speaking, and you follow. The night outside is still. The mist has not yet rolled in from the harbor, but the air carries its scent. Salt, wet wood, faint. Fish from the morning market. You walk through a network of alleys, some narrow enough for your shoulders to brush the walls, others opening suddenly into small courtyards where lone lanterns sway from unseen wires. She turns without hesitation, her heels barely making a sound on the worn cobblestones. You pass a shuttered tea shop, a pawn window with a single jade bracelet hanging in the dark, and a boarded door painted over with a fading crane motif. At last, she stops at a low, unmarked doorway. She knocks twice, pauses, knocks once more. The door opens to a room smelling of rope and brine. Wooden crates are stacked high against the walls, coils of hemp leaning in the corners. Somewhere unseen, water drips slowly into a metal bucket. Inside, 3 men wait. One, you know, the broad-shouldered man from the basement chamber, standing with his arms folded, a shadow stretched behind him. The second is younger, his shirt open at the collar, fingers drumming on the tabletop in quick, uneven bursts. The third is older, his skin weathered, his eyelids lowered as though listening to something the rest of you can't hear. The broad-shouldered man speaks first. "There's a package," he says. "Small, wrapped in cloth. You'll take it to the Northern Quay, the warehouse with the green shutters. You'll give it to the man who asks you for the second time. Only the second time, not the first. You almost ask what's inside, but the older man interrupts. "You don't need to know," he says. And the way he says it makes you certain you truly don't. The woman in the cheongsam steps forward, placing something in your hand, a black square of folded silk, edges perfectly aligned. It's light, but the center is solid, unyielding. The folds are tied with a single loop of red thread. "Don't open it," she says. Her voice is even, but there's something in her eyes, not warning, not fear, but a kind of patience. You leave at once. The streets to the quay are mostly empty. A stray dog noses at a pile of cabbage leaves in the gutter. The glow from a few upper windows falls across the cobblestones, yellow and warm against the cool dark. Somewhere ahead, a bell rings twice from a moored vessel, followed by the creak of ropes under strain. At the edge of the quay, you see the first man. He steps from a shadowed doorway as if he's been waiting for you. His coat is buttoned too. The neck, his hands bare despite the chill. "You have the package?" he asks, voice steady. You shake your head. He studies your face for a moment, then steps aside without another word. Further in, past stacks of tarpaulin-covered crates and the skeletal frame of an unfinished skiff. The second man waits. Younger, cleaner, wearing a fisherman's cap too new to be his. "You have the package?" he asks. You place the silk-wrapped bundle in his hand. He doesn't look at it, only closes his fingers around it and nods. Without a word, he turns toward the green-shuttered warehouse and disappears inside. You stay for a moment, letting the sound of the harbor settle round you. The water slaps gently at the pilings. Somewhere out on the black water, an oar dips and rises, the rhythm slow, deliberate. When you turn to leave, you take a different route. Narrower streets, fewer lanterns. You pass an open window from which the smell of soy and ginger drifts out, and for a moment you hear laughter, sudden and bright. Before it cuts off, the city feels altered. Lantern light seems dimmer, the gaps between buildings darker. You catch the movement of a shadow in an alley you just passed, but when you glance back, it's gone. In the upper floors, someone leans from a balcony, watching you with no attempt to hide it. Back at the Lantern House, the main lounge is quieter than you've ever seen it. The erhu player is still there, bow drawing the same slow, curling notes. But half the tables are empty. The broad-shouldered man sits in the far corner, playing a card game with no visible opponent. His face unreadable. When your eyes meet, he gives a single nod. Not gratitude, acknowledgement. You take your seat. Your tea arrives without you ordering. No note on the saucer this time, no tile. Only the steam curling upward, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and something else, sharper, metallic. You watch the door. The man in the black coat enters. His coat is unbuttoned now, and his hands are empty. He doesn't look at you, but his passing feels like a ripple through the room, a shift in the air, a moment when everyone seems to breathe, in and hold. He walks straight toward the stairs to the upper floor. A small group at the baccarat table breaks up, chairs scraping against the floor. One man slips an envelope into his jacket before leaving through the side door. The dice keeper at the wall. Clock glances at the time, nods almost imperceptibly to the mahjong dealer, then turns the clock back by 2 minutes. You stay until the tea cools, until the last table in your sight empties. When you step outside, the mist has thickened. The harbor lights are blurred halos in the distance, their reflections trembling in the dark water. Somewhere far out, a ship sounds its horn, one long, low note, drawn out until it fades into the air. Walking home, you feel for the white dragon tile, but it isn't there. Of course it isn't. It hasn't been since the moment you placed the silk package in the second man's hand, and yet the weight of it lingers in your palm, as though some part of it stayed behind. The streets are empty. The city sleeps. Somewhere the Lantern House plays on, the games moving like tides beneath the floorboards, and you wonder, not for the first time, if you're walking away from it or deeper inside. You don't go back to the Lantern House the next night, or the night after. You tell yourself it's caution to avoid appearing eager, but the truth is you're waiting for something. A signal, perhaps. A feeling it arrives on the third night, just before midnight. You're walking home from the harbor when you see the boy in the flat cap. You've noticed him before, usually sitting on a crate near the spice warehouse, idly tossing a coin. Tonight, he's in the mouth of your street, standing perfectly still, When you approach, he says only, "They're waiting," and turns. You follow. The city at this hour is a different creature, all ribs and shadows. The wind moving through its alleys like breaths through hollow bone. The boy takes you along streets you've never walked, past a row of shuttered stalls, still fragrant with ginger and star anise. Over a narrow footbridge that creaks under your weight. You emerge on a quiet lane behind the lantern house instead of the front entrance. You're led to a side door you've never noticed, plain wood, the paint peeling in strips. The boy knocks twice, waits, knocks again. The door opens without a sound. Inside, the air is warmer, thicker, scented faintly with sandalwood. You're in a narrow corridor lined with framed photographs, black and white images of the harbor. The bunt, a row of women in changsoms holding parasols. None are labeled at the far end. A staircase rises steeply. The boy gestures you upward and disappears back into the night. The upper floor is not like the downstairs at all. Here, the light is softer, golden, falling from paper lanterns shaped like lotus blossoms. The rooms are smaller, each one set back from a central hall. Through an open doorway you glimpse a low table with two men bent over a board of carved ivory tiles you don't recognize. Not mahjong, not any game you've seen before. In another room, a woman in a green silk robe plays a guzheng. Her fingers moving so lightly it's hard to tell if she's touching the strings at all. You're led further down the hall by a tall man in a grey vest. He doesn't speak, but his stride is purposeful. The floorboards here don't creak. The walls seem thicker. You pass a door that's been left ajar, just enough to see stacks of ledgers on the floor, each bound in red thread at the end of the hall. The man in the grey vest stops, opens a door, and stands aside. Inside is a round room, its walls lined with shelves of books and scrolls. A single low table sits in the center, holding a brass teapot and 2 cups. One is empty. The other is in the hand of the woman in the pale blue cheongsom. She gestures for you to sit. When you do, she pours tea into your cup without asking. The steam carries the scent of chrysanthemum. "You delivered the package," she says, not. As a question, you nod. "Good, then you can carry something else." She reaches for a drawer in the table, sliding it open to reveal a thin envelope. The paper is heavy, cream-colored, unmarked. She places it in front of you. "This goes to the Western District. You'll find a tailor named Shen. His shop has no sign, only a red paper lantern in the window. You give it to him directly. You ask what's inside. She smiles faintly. What was inside, the last one? You take the envelope. It's light, almost too light, as if empty. When you stand to leave, she says, "You've been downstairs twice, and now upstairs once. There's a 3rd floor, but no one reaches it by asking." Back in the hallway, the man in the grey vest is waiting. He leads you to a narrow stairwell that descends not to the street, but to a courtyard at the back of the building. The gate to the alley is open. The Western District lies across the city, and the route you take cuts through 3 markets and a canal crossing. The air is colder here, sharper, carrying the smoke of charcoal braziers. You pass a row of men huddled around a fire in a barrel, their voices low, their eyes following you as you go. Shen's shop is exactly as described. No sign, only the dim red glow of a paper lantern in the window. Inside, the tailor is alone, seated at a table scattered with spools of thread and scraps of brocade. He doesn't look up when you enter. "Do you have something for me?" he says. You hand him the envelope. He takes it without opening it, slides it under the table, and stands. Wait here, he says, and disappears through a back curtain. The shop is silent except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. After several minutes, he returns, carrying a small wooden box. It's carved with a wave pattern so finely cut you can feel the ridges under your fingertips. This is for her, he says. You don't ask what's inside. The return walk feels longer. Somewhere in the distance, a patrol bell clangs twice, followed by hurried footsteps you never see. At the canal, a boatman watches you from the far bank, his oar resting across his knees. When you reach the lantern house courtyard, the back door is open. You step inside to find the woman waiting, seated at the same table. She takes the box without a word, sets it on the table beside her cup, and studies you for a long moment. Some people come here to win, she says. Some come to lose, and some come to be carried along. Her gaze is steady. Which are you? You open your mouth, but she holds up a hand. Don't answer, not yet. From somewhere upstairs, higher than you've been, you hear the slow, deliberate strike of a gong. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound fades, leaving only the soft hiss of the lanterns and the faint rustle of the Changsam's silk as she stands. When it's time, she says, you'll know the way you leave through the front door this time. The main floor is busier now, the tables full, the air thick with the scent of tea and tobacco. As you pass, the broad-shouldered man glances up from his cards, his eyes lingering just long enough for you to notice. Outside, the mist has returned, swallowing the street ahead. You walk into it, the glow of the lantern house fading behind you until it's only a memory of light in the fog. You don't try to find the 3rd floor. The woman's words stay with you. No one reaches it by asking, and so you keep to the rhythm that's been given to you. Days pass. You run small errands when called. You drink tea in your usual seat when not. Sometimes the work is nothing more than passing a folded scrap of paper to a bookseller. Sometimes it's delivering a sealed jar to a woman in a riverside house that smells of opium and oranges. You're never told what these items are for, and you've stopped wondering. The lantern house is not built on explanations. One night, you arrive to find the place almost empty. No games at the baccarat table, no dice by the wall clock. The erhu player is gone, replaced by silence so complete you can hear the faint crackle of the lantern wicks. The broad-shouldered man appears at your side. They're ready for you, he says, and nothing more. You follow him, instead of heading toward the stairs, you know. He leads you deeper into the back, past a curtain you've never seen drawn, into a narrow service passage that smells of damp wood and camphor. The walls here are unfinished, the plaster giving way to bare boards. At the end of the passage is a door you'd never have noticed painted the same color as the wall, handle worn smooth. The man opens it and steps aside. Inside is a single, windowless room lit only by a hanging bulb. In the center stands the woman in the pale blue cheongsam. "You're two, go up," she says. No greeting, no tea. She leads you to a spiral staircase, so narrow you have to turn sideways to climb. The air grows warmer with each step, scented faintly with sandalwood and something sharper, lacquer, perhaps, or ink. At the top, there is no door, only a short corridor ending in a beaded curtain. You part the beads and step inside. The third floor is nothing like the two below. It's one vast room, its ceiling low, the walls draped in heavy red silk. In the center stands a square table of dark wood, its surface inlaid with a pattern of black and white tiles that shift almost imperceptibly as you watch, rearranging themselves like slow-moving fish. Around the table sit 4 players. You recognize none of them. One is a woman with hair silver as coins, her eyes sharp and restless. One is a man in a military coat, the medals pinned to his chest, dulled with tarnish. One is a young boy, no older than 12, whose hands rest flat on the table as if holding it still. And one is a figure whose face you can't seem to focus on each time you look. It's different, older, younger, familiar. Strange, an empty chair waits for you. The woman in the Shongsam takes a position behind you, her hand light on the back of your chair. You will play 1 round, she says. She does not tell you the rules. The tiles before you are unlike any you've seen. Some marked with symbols you recognize, the white dragon, the bamboo stalks, others with shapes that seem to shift when you're not looking. Your first move feels instinctive, as though your hands already know what to do. The other players move in silence, their eyes never meeting yours. At some point, you can't say when, you realize the game is not about winning or losing in the usual sense. The board reflects more than the tiles. Each move seems to alter the room, the air, the light. A tile placed by the silver-haired woman makes the walls ripple like water. One moved by the boy deepens the shadows under the table, until they seem to stretch into another space entirely. Your own moves change the scent in the air. Jasmine on one, burnt cedar on another. The figure with the shifting face plays a tile that makes the table shudder, as though something beneath it had stirred. The round ends without anyone declaring victory. The tiles rearrange themselves into a perfect grid, and the boy reaches forward to remove one, the white dragon. He places it in front of you. "You'll need this," he says. The woman in the Chansum leans down. "It will open only 1 door, she murmurs. "Choose carefully." You rise, the tile cold in your palm. The other players remain seated, their attention already returning to the shifting board. The beaded curtain parts without touch, and you step into a different corridor than the one you came through. This one slopes downward in a slow, deliberate spiral, the walls lined with shelves of sealed boxes. Each box is marked with a single Chinese character. Some you recognize: river, moon, silence. Others are unfamiliar. Halfway down, you hear footsteps behind you, slow, steady, matching yours. You don't look back. At the bottom of the spiral, there are 3 doors. One is painted red, its surface scratched and scarred as if by claws. One is plain wood, with a single brass handle polished to a dull gleam. One is black, lacquered to a perfect shine, with no handle at all. The white dragon tile in your hand grows warmer. When you hold it near the black door, you hear a faint click like a lock turning from the inside. You push. The door opens onto an outdoor terrace. The night air is cold, sharp with the scent of the harbor. From here, the city spreads out in every direction. Lantern lights scattered across the dark like stars caught in water. A figure stands at the railing. It's the broad-shouldered man, though he wears no jacket now, only a shirt with the sleeves rolled. He doesn't turn when you step closer. "This place," he says, "is not built on chance. The game's downstairs, those are the surface. What matters happens here." He places something small and heavy into your hand. It's a key, old and iron, the bow worked into the shape of a koi. "When the tide turns," he says, "bring this back. You'll know where to use it." Before you can ask, he steps past you into the corridor. The black door closes without a sound. You stay on the terrace, the city breathing below you. In the distance, a foghorn sounds, long and low. Somewhere far off, you hear the faint echo of a gong, and you can't tell if it's from the harbor or from inside the lantern house itself. You slip the key into your pocket beside the white dragon tile, and for the first time, you realize they weigh exactly the same. You keep the key and the white dragon tile in different pockets. You tell yourself it's precaution, but it's really because you don't yet know which one will matter more. Days pass. No summons from the lantern house, no boy in the flat cap. At the corner, you begin to think you've been forgotten. Then, one morning before dawn, someone knocks on your door. Not a polite tap, 3 hard raps that echo in the frame. When you open it, the street outside is still and dim, the air sharp, with a folded scrap of paper lies on the step. Inside, 4 characters written in neat black ink. Char Yudren. The tide has turned. You put the key in your palm, weighing it. It feels heavier than before. The harbor is quieter than usual when you arrive. The fog is so thick it feels like wading through cloth. Ships loom suddenly from the white, their hulls dripping. Somewhere, a bell clangs in slow, steady rhythm. You follow the wharves until you find the boatman. Not a boatman, the boatman. You've seen him before, on the far bank that night with the box. Now he waits in a narrow sampan, or resting across his knees. You have it, he asks. You show him the key. He nods, gestures for you to step in. The boat slides away from the dock with barely a sound. The water is dark, oily, disturbed only by the dip and pull of the oar. At first, you think he's taking you across the river. But the current under the hull is strange. Not the steady drag you know, but a pull that seems to draw you sideways. Deeper into the fog, land appears, not ahead, but to the side. A long, low pier of black wood, slick with moisture. At the far end stands a single warehouse, its windows dark. The boatman leaves you there. You'll know when to use it, he says. And then he's gone, swallowed by the white. The warehouse door is iron-banded wood, locked with a heavy chain. When you press the koi-shaped bow of the key into the padlock, it clicks open as if it had been waiting. Inside, the air is warmer, scented faintly of cedar and something metallic. The floorboards are damp, and the only light comes from a row of lanterns hung along a central path. At the far end is another door, smaller, plain, with no handle. A shallow recess in the center matches the size of the white dragon tile exactly. When you press it in, there's a soft hiss, and the door swings inward. Beyond is not another room, but a tunnel. The walls are smooth stone, the ceiling low enough that you have to duck. Water drips somewhere in the dark. The air is colder here, tasting faintly of salt. The tunnel slopes downward, the lantern light behind you shrinking with each step. Eventually, it flattens and opens into a cavern. You hear it before you see it, the slow, steady lap of waves against rock. Then the cavern widens, and you're standing on a narrow ledge above an underground harbor. Boats are moored to wooden posts driven into the stone, their hulls painted in deep reds and greens. The air smells of tar and tide. A man in a long dark coat waits beside one of the boats. "You're late," he says. You step in without argument. The journey is soundless except for the dip of the oars. The water here is unlike the river, heavier, almost sluggish, yet with a faint undertow that brushes the hull like a hand. The cavern narrows, then opens again into a hidden inlet under open sky. The fog has followed you here, but the air tastes different, cleaner, sharper. On the far shore stands a structure you can't quite name. It's part pier, part temple, part crumbling fortress. Lanterns sway from ropes strung between leaning poles, their light caught in the mist. The man in the coat guides the boat to a narrow set of steps. "This is where I leave you," he says. The steps lead up to a wooden platform where a single figure waits, the silver-haired woman from the third floor. She's dressed not in silk tonight, but in a dark coat belted at the waist. "You brought both," she says. Not a question, she leads you inside. The interior is unlike the lantern. House, no silk, no polished wood, no perfume of tea. This place smells of rope and brine, its walls lined with shelves of jars, coils of netting, and bundles of dried herbs. In the center stands a table of black stone. Spread across it is a map, not of Shanghai as you know it, but of the rivers, canals, and inlets beyond, drawn in lines so fine they seem almost alive. She places the key on the map. The metal glints faintly, and for a moment you think you see the water lines on the map shift, as though the rivers themselves are moving. "You've seen the third floor," she says, "but the lantern house is only one harbor among many. Some are in the open, some are hidden, and some, like this one, are reached only when the tide allows." She places the white dragon tile beside the key. "You'll carry these upriver. There's a man who waits by the old locks. Give them to him, and return with what he offers you. Ask what he'll give you." She studies you for a long moment. "Something you won't want," she says, "but something you'll need." The journey upriver takes you through waters that feel older than the city itself. The banks are lined with bare trees, their roots clutching the mud like hands. Occasionally you pass another boat, never more than a shadow in the fog, and its rower never looks up. By the time you reach the old locks, night has fallen fully. The structure looms from the water like the spine of some ancient beast. Its gates rusted and barnac lead dot. A man waits on the stones above, tall, thin, wearing a cap pulled low. He doesn't speak as you climb up, just extends a hand. You place the key and the tile into his palm. He slips them into a pocket and hands you something wrapped in oilcloth. It's small, light, and when you touch it, you can feel the hard edges of what might be wood. He leans in, his breath carrying the scent of tobacco. "When you hear the second gong," he says, "open it, not before." The return trip feels different. The current has changed, slower, heavier, as if the river knows what you carry. The fog seems thicker, muffling every sound but the drip of water from the oars. When you reach the inlet again, the silver-haired woman is gone. The temple fortress stands empty, the lanterns swaying in the cold wind. You find your way back to the hidden cavern, the tunnel, the warehouse. The padlock on the outer door is closed, the chain wound tight, but you don't remember locking it. By the time you reach your own street, the city feels different, not in the way of weather or time of day, but as if its streets have shifted. Slightly, the angles between them unfamiliar. You set the oilclothed object on your table. It sits there, silent, waiting. Somewhere in the distance, a gong strikes once. This chapter expands the lantern. House is whirled while keeping the pacing deliberate. You're moving into the outer ring of its influence, meeting other harbors, and realizing the city is part of a much larger network. The oilcloth package is the new hook. The oilcloth wrapped object waits on your table for 3 days. You don't open it. Not because you're following the instruction when you hear the second gong, open it, but because you know, instinctively, that opening it too soon would make something irreversible. The city moves on outside your window. Hawkers call in the morning, rickshaw bells in the afternoon. Nights bring the slow drift of lanterns along the bund, the occasional hiss of steam from a passing ferry, but you notice things you didn't before. A woman in a green shawl who appears on the opposite corner each day at the same hour, never crossing the street. A delivery boy who always takes the long way around your alley, even when it's raining. A white cat that sits on the roof across from yours, eyes fixed on your window, never blinking. On the 4th night, the first gong sounds. It's distant, heavy, as though struck in the belly of the city itself. The sound lingers in the air long after the strike fades. You don't sleep. You sit at the table with the package, a candle burning low beside it, waiting. The second gong could come in an hour or a week. That's how the lantern house works. Time isn't measured in minutes here, but in thresholds. It comes at dawn. You're not even sure you hear it at first. The city is waking. Carts on the cobbles, voices in the street. But beneath it all, deep and resonant, the second gong rolls through the air. Your hands move before your mind does. You untie the cord around the oilcloth, peel it back. Inside is a wooden box no larger than your palm, the surface carved with a pattern of interlocking waves. There's no lock, no hinge, just 2 halves that fit together seamlessly. When you press your thumbs against the sides, it opens with a soft click. Inside is nothing dot, or at least it looks like nothing. A shallow hollow lined in black felt. No paper, no coin. No key, but when you tilt it toward the candlelight, you see movement, not in the box, but in the air above it. Shapes rise like smoke, twisting, forming patterns. You recognize some, the shifting tiles from the 3rd floor, the coil of the river on the map in the temple fortress. Others are unfamiliar. A gate of black lacquer, a lantern swinging in wind you can't feel, the silhouette of a figure with a face you can't focus on dot, and then the shapes fold inward, collapsing into a single image, a door you know it's not. In the lantern house, you've never seen it, but you know exactly where it is. By the time you reach the docks, the fog is lifting. The harbor smells of salt and coal smoke. The boatman is waiting. He doesn't ask why you've come. He simply rows, taking you not aprovert or into the cavern, but out toward the open water. The coastline slips past, the city shrinking behind you. Eventually you see it, a small island, little more than a black rock rising from the sea. At its highest point stands the door from the vision. It's not set into a wall or a house. It stands alone, freestanding, its frame of weathered wood, its panels painted red and peeling. You climb the rock. The sea wind pulls at your coat. The box is in your pocket, the white dragon tile in the other. When you reach the door, there is no handle, just a shallow recess where the tile fits perfectly. The moment you press it in, the air changes. The sound of the waves fades. The wind stills. You open the door. On the other side is not the sea, not the island, but the lantern house. Not as you know it, but as it must have been long before you ever saw it. The wood is unscarred, the silk hangings bright, the air warm with the scent of sandalwood and tea. The tables are full, the games in motion, the erhu plays, and at the center, on the 1st floor, is the woman in the pale blue cheongsam. She smiles, as though you've only just arrived. You brought it back, she says. You realize the box is no longer in your hand. The key is gone too. Only the white dragon tile remains, cool in your palm. She nods toward the stairs. You may go up now, as far as you like. You climb past the second floor, past the third. The stairs don't end. The higher you go, the more the sounds from below fade, replaced by something else. A slow, steady rhythm, like the turning of the tide. The air grows warmer, lighter, until you feel as though you're walking through water without resistance. When you finally stop, you are no longer inside the lantern house, but somewhere vast and open. Lanterns hang in the air without strings, swaying in a wind you cannot feel. Beneath them is a sea that stretches in every direction, its surface black and perfectly still in the distance. You see other doors, each standing alone, each with someone. Stepping through, and you understand the lantern house was never just a building. It's a crossing, a place between tides. The white dragon tile warms in your hand. You look down and see that its surface is no longer fixed. The dragon moves, coiling and uncoiling, its eyes bright as lanterns. When you look up again, there's a door before you, waiting. You step through,